Hello again, everyone. So sorry about that earlier on. So again, let me just welcome everyone to our Acronis Cyber Protect virtual conference. Today, we have our virtual conference team titled Defeating Cybercriminals in 3 Moves. So my name is Alvin Kwa, Senior Product Manager at Acronis, and I'm delighted to be your host today. So just before we kick things off, I'd just like to share with you a few housekeeping notes. This conference is being recorded, and we will, of course, email you the link to the recording afterwards, after the event is over, so that you can share it with your friends and your colleagues who can't be here. Your microphone will be muted throughout the event, so if you have any questions, please submit them through the Zoom Q&A interface. You can find that directly at the bottom of the screen. We'll try to get all of your questions on the air, but if time doesn't permit, we'll promise to follow up with you directly afterwards. Just also please take note that to avoid clicking on the raise hand button as well, right? Thank you. So today we have a terrific line of speakers for you and a packed agenda. So let's get right on to it. So you see on the screen is your agenda. So the first keynote speaker today will be Serguei Beloussov, our CEO and founder of Acronis. We also have Director Jones, Cybercrime Director from INTERPOL. We'll be giving his keynote about what do you need to protect and why. After that, Deputy Director Lim from National Cyber Threat Analysis Center, CSA, will be giving his keynote, followed by Ken So, CIO at BH Global and CEO at Athena Dynamics. After the keynote is over, we'll have a short demo of our Acronis Cyber Protect 15. And after the demo, we'll have a panel discussion themed Better Security, Higher Automation, and Lower Costs. New solutions deliver on all 3. And finally, we have our last keynote from Frank Dixon, Program Vice President, Security and Digital Trust, IDC. So our first keynote speaker, as I mentioned earlier on, is Serguei Beloussov, CEO and founder of Acronis. He is also the CEO and founder of Schaffhausen Institute of Technology, an international research-led institute located in Switzerland. Without further ado, over to you, Serguei.
This is a presentation which I have generally shown 100 times. So if you've seen it, you will have to bear with some standard slides. But much of the content is relevant to today and is new. So first of all, about Acronis. Acronis is a global leader in cyber protection, which is artificial intelligence-powered protection, cyber cloud and cyber platform. We are headquartered in Schaffhausen, Switzerland, where I am right now. I'm Singaporean, and we have a second headquarter in Singapore, in Suntec City, from where we run our international business. It is important for us to be Swiss and Singaporean at the same time. Both countries are very, very stable, very well managed, as you can see, even how the disease was managed, COVID-19. Very, very friendly to everybody. Economically stable and very developed. And the fact that we have dual headquarters gives us additional ability to protect you. I assume many of you are in many countries, and so the fact that you can do business with both Switzerland and Singapore at all times and can be confident on being here is very useful, especially when it comes to protection. Acronis is a medium-sized company. We are growing very rapidly. We are a multi-$100-million company, and with our new products, we are growing extremely rapidly overall, and especially in our cloud business. We are very broadly used in almost every Fortune 1000 company. We have over 50,000 partners who have done business with us, over 500,000 businesses using our products, and about 5.5 million prosumers. We believe in global local presence. We believe in giving protection to every person in every country. We believe it's a thief's human need, and it's a basic human right. And so with our 1,500 employees, we're based in 33 locations. We have done business in 150 countries last year, and this year we support 33 languages and expect to extend our support to more languages and more equal support across all languages. And even our data centers, which is one of the options where you can send your data, are present in the next 12 months in 100 countries. It's present in 15 countries today. With that, I want to point out that as we noticed, especially now, the world is becoming rapidly completely dependent on digital processes. And digital processes are conducted in bits, zeros and ones. And those bits are extremely easy to use, but at the same time, they're very easy to break and they're very easy to copy. And so they need protection. And protection is becoming very challenging because, first of all, there is very, very large number of systems. We believe there is about 50 billion workloads to be protected globally, and this number will go 10x over the next 10 years. And so it could be very complex, and these workloads to protect, they are based in 1,000 locations. Very rapidly, every person and every business have growing number of workloads, number of locations where to protect them. We also see that the cost is very big challenge because not only the number of devices is growing, but also the amount of data is growing 10x, at least 10x over 10 years. And so anything you pay per gigabyte or per device can become very, very expensive and very expensive to manage. Then security is becoming a reality of life. Now, security is not something which happens to somebody in the newspaper, but it happens to your friend, to your partner, to your company, to yourself. And that is because the crime, cybercrime, is becoming industrialized. Cybercriminals use all the latest tools to build bad security exploits. And it's becoming organized. We believe there is around 300,000 new security threats every day. So everything is being attacked. Then privacy is becoming a major problem because now every piece of data about your business and about yourself is available in a digital form, and it can be exploited to manipulate you, whether it comes to your purchase decisions, to your personal decisions, or to your political decisions. And more importantly, especially with COVID-19, what we've learned is we cannot really function without IT. So we believe IT is fifth basic need, just like water, air, and home shelter. It's a fifth basic need where if IT is off, you cannot actually have food or shelter or air or water in some cases. Now, that only is possible to resolve with a solution which we propose. Our mission is to protect all data, application, and systems, and we believe such protections need to be integrated and completely autonomous. And as such, we need to make sure that we provide you protection from all 5 vectors of possible problems with your IT infrastructure. Safety, so nothing is lost. There is always a copy of everything. Accessibility, you can access anything from anywhere, even in case your system is down, your network is down. Privacy, making sure that you know who has access to your system and to your data. Authenticity, making sure that you know the difference between original and a copy. Security, protection against all bad guys attacking you. And again, we believe that you can only be successful by making it in a one integrated package. Only that way you get to the required benefits: ease of use, total cost of ownership, security control, and reliability. Without it, you cannot scale with number of workloads, with an amount of data, with number of threats, and other challenges. With COVID-19, we've learned what it means to have biological protection. And there is a lot of similarities between protecting biological system and computer system. In case of COVID-19, we learned that we need to do prevention, we need to do social distancing, healthy lifestyle, we need to do detection, super important to do detection, making sure that we have tests. We need to respond by healthcare system, by some treatment, by antiviral drugs, hopefully in the future. We need to be able to recover. For some patients in COVID-19, it takes a long time to recover, and that's what loads our hospital and represents a major threat for health. And finally, we need to do forensic to be able to figure out how to do prevention, how to actually quarantine not all the population of the country, but only those people who are actually sick, and yet how to quarantine all the people who are potentially spreading disease. Actually, it is absolutely the same with digital threats. With digital threats, you also need to do prevention. Most important is to keep your IT infrastructure healthy and make it sure that it's assessed and it's managed and it's set up in such way that the attack or the problem is least likely. You need to do detection in case some attacks are happening in real time, respond in real time if possible. If not possible, do recovery. And always being able to do forensic. If you cannot do forensic, you cannot really figure out what happened. And if you cannot figure out what happened, you cannot prevent it from happening again. You cannot detect it while it's happening again. You cannot respond it at the time when you detect it, and so on and so forth. And we believe, one more time, the only way to go is to go about it, to do it for all the vectors of Acronis Cyber SAPAS: safety, accessibility, privacy, authenticity, and security at the same time. There is no actually other way for you to stay safe with your workload. You have to have it in a single package, single agent, single user interface, single policy, and single technology. Only that way it really works in such ways that's easy enough and cost effective enough for you to be able to manage. Now, with Acronis, that's exactly what we do. We provide a solution which we do. All we do for customers is autonomous integrated modular cyber protection. So cyber protection for customers available both as on-premise as a cloud service. What we are releasing today is Acronis Cyber Protect 15, which is again available as on-premise as a cloud service through our classic channel. Our channel uses Acronis Cloud-based Cyber Cloud today, service providers, in the future, both service providers and classic resellers, to offer cyber protection to customers. We make cyber protection into an open platform. Acronis Cyber Platform is an open platform which allows our partners and customers to extend, integrate, and customize cyber cloud for their needs or cyber protection for the needs of customers. It is based on our built by Acronis cyber infrastructure, which is what we use in Acronis cyber data centers, and we will make available in over 3,000 partner data centers for you to be able to choose where you have your protection, compute, and storage. And we actually augment and extend it with Acronis cyber services, specifically Acronis Cyber Fit Academy for partners and customers, but also other services for partners and other services for customers to make it complete. And that's actually, this slide describes what we do. Never mind you use our classic product or you use our cloud product, or you sell our classic product, you sell our cloud product. It's really one offer today. Now, I want to stop on several important things, important notes about our products. So first of all of our technology are based on Acronis Cyber Engine, which is our autonomous engine, which is our unique innovation. We have over 300 patents. We are filing every year over 75 patents, which is a very large number for a company of our size. And that is cyber learning, cyber autonomous engine, which is not only automatically analyzing the anomalies in what happens on your computer, on a computer similar to yours, but also it is autonomously figuring out what is happening on the different other sources of data, and autonomously enhancing itself and actually making actions, not just reporting it to you or to a system administrator which manages your workload, or to MSP, but it actually makes the actions by itself. The engine, which is very important part of our offer, is equally well working on a connected and disconnected workloads. Of course, most of our computers are connected to internet at all times, but sometimes those connections are not perfect, and sometimes you are disconnected. Nevertheless, you're disconnected, or nevertheless, you have a slow connection. You have to be fully protected. Nobody of our competitors have the full protection working without internet connection. Then our cyber autonomous engine is based on technology which we call Acronis Cyber Bus. Our value proposition is not that we just, like many of our competitors, providing part of SAPAS in the form of multiple products, but it is actually a single agent, single user interface, and single policy. And so to get this integration, we have a unique technology which we built painfully over the past 10 years, which we call Acronis Cyber Bus. And because of that, all of these advantages of Cyber Engine are working across not just security, but also safety, accessibility, privacy, and authenticity at the same time. And we analyze events not only related to security problems, but also related to the health of your system, of the system which is similar to yours, of your hard disk, of your other parts of your system, of your operating system, of your patch level, using all the data available to us, and we collect the data from tens of millions of data sources. So today we're releasing Acronis Cyber Protect, which is all-in-one protection designed for IT professionals. What is the main difference in comparison to what we have released in the past? In the past, the company was releasing first passive backup and then active backup. And now we're releasing for the first time Acronis Cyber Protect. There is really these differences on the slide. First of all, it's an integrated proactive, active, and reactive protection in one package. And again, this is not just for security, and it's not just for backup, but it's across backup, disaster recovery, vulnerability assessment, patch management, security, privacy management, authenticity management. All of this is proactive, active, and reactive. So first of all, we're trying to assess and manage your patch level and your configuration to avoid possible failures. You really don't want to need to be protected. You want everything to work. You want to be impenetrable. Then at all the time, in a real time, we monitor what is happening with your machine. And again, it doesn't come just only for security purposes, but also we monitor what happens with your operating system level, with users which are going around in your machine, which might be legitimate users for privacy, what is happening with your hardware. And then in real time, we can actually make changes and avoid the failure in real time. And then if we couldn't avoid the failure in real time, we can do a very quick automatic restore. Now, it's important that we do not believe that it is forever now possible that there will be a situation when you actually manage a single workload. Almost nobody on this call, I'm pretty sure, is actually having a single workload. Almost everybody in this call, I'm pretty sure, is actually managing multiple workloads, and in the future managing actually hundreds of workloads in a single from a single seat. And so you really need to be fully integrated, and Cyber Protect is designed for productivity and efficiency of IT professional, whether it's IT professional at a managed service provider, classic reseller, or in-house system administrator. I wanted to stop a bit on Acronis Cyber Protect Security, which is for the first time we're releasing fully blown security product. And it's not just fully blown security product, but it's a complete set of integrated security products in one package. It includes core anti-malware technology, which is relatively standard, but we have number of advanced new generation things like artificial intelligence-based static analyzer, dynamic behavioral protection, and other things. It is advanced artificial intelligence-based technology with autonomous cyber engine and many other things. It includes preventive technology. One very important thing about preventive technology, which we have vulnerability assessment and patch management and configuration management, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It actually exists in consideration of what the rest of the security and the rest of the protection does. Now, we do not believe that it is longer possible to have a protection which does not include management. And so we have security management as a part of the package. You have to manage your machine. The most important way for you to avoid security problems is not to run some kind of antivirus software only, which is of course what we provide, but to configure your system to minimize possible problems and to be able to recover. And for that, we have integrated backup. With that, we believe we have unique advantages with complete integrated and autonomous endpoint protection. So first of all, we have automatic instant recovery of any amount of data which is on your system. So damaged files, if they're damaged by anything, can be recovered from local cache, from local backup, or from cloud backup. Nobody else is able to do it automatically. There is no package which allows you to do it automatically. And there is always a limitation on number of files and size of files. There are people who do it with 1 gigabyte of files. There are people who do it with 500 megabyte, 50 megabyte. All of this is very, very small. Many of us have today many files on our file system which are larger than many gigabytes. Then we do not depend on connectivity. Very important, especially in the countries in Asia, is that in many places connectivity is not always. And in fact, what the bad guy can do, it can come to your system and switch off productivity or make it very slow in order to then attack your system. And our autonomous AI-based engine works in real time without connectivity. None of our competitors do it in a full fashion. They always require at all time connection to cloud-based detection engine, and otherwise they cannot really protect your system. Forensic data and backups. We can store metadata and memory dumps sufficient for you to do full forensic investigation. And so as a result, if something happens, you immediately have enough data to investigate, and you immediately can figure out what happened and avoid it from happening again. Nobody else can do it. There are some EDR solutions, and they source certain types of events, but not the data with these events. You can use the data with EDR solutions, but it's not sufficient. The bad guys, the real bad guys, as you will see from subsequent slides, easily finds a way to work it around. Then we provide application level protection. Because we run on the machine, we can use AI on very fine grain level and actually protect you on a fine grain level, not just protect the system. The bad guys are no longer actually attacking you on a system level. They are application specific. And finally, we have multi-layer detection, which I will describe on multiples on the next slide, which you are protected in multiple levels. So again, this is our protection funnel. So it's a unique funnel. We have unique expertise and low-level I/O, both in memory and in hard disk. And as such, we can protect you on very low level. We can protect you against things like new malware technique, like replace, which is using symlinks to encrypt files to evade discovery by all these guys here. We protect you against malware evasive techniques working with low-level data. And very important part of what we do, agent and backups are self-protected. They're hidden from the bad guys. It's a single agent for security and for backup, and we're hidden from the bad guy. He cannot find us, he cannot switch us off. So if you look at our protection panel, is absolutely unique in being combined. Nobody else provide you all these levels of protection in a single package. On top, you have vulnerability assessment and patch management, which are also AI-driven and very broad. URL filtering to stop browser, like exploit prevention, cloud reputation analysis, anti-malware engine scan, including signature-based prevention, AI-based static analyzer, if something is not caught by that, data protection, heuristics, behavioral protection, which we constantly enhance, and we believe we have the best-in-class behavioral protection today. And then we can figure out the critical areas for fileless threats, especially with our ability to scan backups. And if not, it's important that we're self-protected, so the bad guys did not switch us off, and you can always recover from backup. Let me demonstrate it on a few examples. One of the famous examples is Wasted Locker attack on Garmin. Garmin actually is also based in Schaffhausen. I'm sure many people on this call use Garmin watches, and I'm sure many people have seen Garmin in their navigation. What is even more interesting, in Garmin used almost in all commercial aviation for navigation. And so that wonderful company, which is actually not a new company, extremely well run, produces extremely high products, was attacked by Wasted Locker. And it was not able to protect itself. It has used, we believe, CrowdStrike and Commvault. And so here, we would have stopped anti-malware, this protection on the anti-malware engine scan level. Then our AI static analyzer would have stopped it. If not, malware engine scan layer would have stopped it. Then our behavioral protection would have stopped it. And in fact, if none of this would have helped, we could have recovered from backup. So if you look at mains ransomware, this is an example of a real example of sample of infected 9 machines in Xerox. There were 2 which were not patched sufficiently, and they were made inoperable. And if you look at Acronis Cyber Protect, all 9 machines would have been recovered immediately. Those were patched. The 2 machines would have to be restored from the cloud with about 1 hour delay. So you can think about 1 hour of business for 2 machines lost, which we estimate of about $100 loss. If you would have used CrowdStrike and Commvault does have immutable backups. Many of our competitors confuse use that having an immutable backup is enough. In reality, the bad guy can get into the Commvault, get into the storage, and if they do, they switch off immutability of backups or make sure that your backups don't work for long enough time. So in this case, ransomware would not be detected. So detection was not available for 25 days. All the 11 machines will be locked out, and you would have lost 33 hours downtime and 88 hours recovery time. We estimate the loss of about $6,000. And then the real life situation of using a relatively simplistic security engine like Webroot, albeit working on the market for a long time, and using very popular Vim backup, which doesn't have self-protection and doesn't have immutable backups, ransomware would not be detected. All 11 machines will be locked out. All the backups would be deleted, and you will have to pay the ransom. And so we would estimate that it will be very long time and will be about $200,000 of cost. Now, let me just give you another example. This is a recent ransomware, Ragnarloka, Clop, and Doppelpaymeyer. So Acronis would have detected and stopped all of this in a moment. And one more time, if for any chance you would have had a ransomware which would have encrypted some files on your machine, then in that case, we would have been able to recover from backup. It wouldn't be necessary for these guys. Now, if you look at the slide, there is only one vendor who actually detects the Ragnarloka beside us, which is Bitdefender. But Bitdefender is not doing well with Clop and Doppelpaymeyer, where we actually detect all of them. Again, the most important threat today, the most expensive threat today, the most likely threat today for you and your customers and your workloads is ransomware. And Acronis has the best solution today. Now, we believe in providing complete solution for endpoint and edgepoint. We believe in providing a single product which includes all aspects of security. And so this is a very simple comparison with two competitors, Symantec and Webroot. And today we have a better solution. And within next 2 quarters, and if you buy CyberProtect, it is a subscription-based product. So if you just use it, you will get all those things for free. We will provide you data leak prevention, endpoint detection and response, zero trust assessment and management in one package. And 2 unique things, Cyber Protection Recovery Manager, which helps you to recover in automatic and easy fashion, and Cyber Protection Forensic Manager. All of this is either available or coming very soon. We're testing it. And so again, it's the best protection today, and it's by far the best protection in the near future, which is confirmed by the top security alliances. We have very new product. The product is available on the market as a cloud service for about 6 months. Nevertheless, we're already in the top tests and top certification and security alliances, which are listed here. And we will be in top 3, top 5 in every list and every certification over the next 6 months. It's a focus of our marketing. So, you know, really, what can you do? One thing which we launched together with this initiative is a CyberFit score. And so you can get your CyberFit score by going to go.acronis.com/score, download a free tool and assess your device. And we intend to do CyberFit scoring for workload, for customers, also for partners, being ready to protect customers and being ready to offer our products, CyberFit countries, also to test our partner network and infrastructure to be able to protect customers and partners. And we're going to continuously promote it with our CyberFit sport partners, which all use CyberProtect already today. Williams Racing in Formula One, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Neo, over 80 sport teams, which will aggressively promote CyberFit and aggressively use CyberFit. In sports, there is no allocation for downtime. And so you have to be always on to be able to win. And so with that, what do you need to do? What's your next step? So there is this just simple steps. Get your CyberFit score. It is free. You can just see whether your machine is protected or not. And it will explain to you how the score is calculated, and the maximum score is 800. You can download the product. The product is free to download. You can install it on your devices, Acronis CyberProtect on any of your devices. Most of the devices, most of the workloads we cover with CyberProtect, Windows, Mac, VMware, Hyper-V, and so on and so forth. If you're a partner or if you're IT professional, you can go and get automatically trained in Acronis Cyber Academy with Acronis CyberProtect capabilities. And again, here is URL where you can see the demo and go to the training. I suggest that you consider protecting every workload around you, being penetrated and being broken, no matter how unimportant the workload may look to you, whether it's a home machine or your child machine, whether it's a secondary home machine. You don't want to have anything broken or stolen in your home or in your office. And another thing which I highly encourage our classic partners to consider, and something which we push, is to actually consider not only offering our product in a classic fashion, which is the product we're launching today, but also to become Acronis CyberProtect MSP and offer it as a managed service to your partners, customers, and workloads. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you like the product and the rest of the presentation.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation. So I would just like to take this time to remind everyone again that we will make the recording of this presentation, of this whole event, and it will be made available to you after the event is over. Right? Okay. Before we move to the next speaker, I would just like to conduct a quick audience poll. Okay, so the poll is about this. What is your direct experience of ransomware attack? So you see now on your screen that it's this poll. So please choose one of the answers that is stated on the screen over here. Again, we encourage everyone to participate in this poll. What is your direct experience of ransomware attacks? So we'll let the poll run for another 15 seconds before we close it. Okay, 10 more seconds before we close this poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you everyone for participating. So we will share the poll results with you guys as well after this. Okay, so let's move on to the next keynote speaker. I'd like to now formally introduce you to Director Jones. Director Jones leads Interpol's global cybercrime program, aiming to reduce the global impact of cybercrime and protect communities for a safer world. Under this mandate, he focuses on operational delivery, cyber threat response, and capabilities developed in support of 194 Interpol member countries. With over 27 years of law enforcement experience, he is an expert in the area of cyber digital crime, investigations, and capabilities development. Previously, he held several senior management positions in the UK law enforcement, and most recently at the National Crime Agency in the UK. Over to you, Director Jones.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today and being able to present to you. The theme of what I'm going to talk about is what do you need to protect and why? And I think in the previous poll gives you a good example of what we need to protect from, but also in Serguei's presentation, he's covered a fantastic amount of points. And we're going to look at this now from a different side about how does policing address this? And also as an organization such as Interpol, what do we need to protect and why? Next slide, please. So as we see now, and we know, criminals are operating in both the physical and virtual environment. Policing historically, and even nowadays, has still been very much embedded in the physical environment. So policing its society, walking the streets, looking at burglaries, violent crimes, commodity-based crimes such as drug trafficking and things like that. As we can now see on the international side, that has grown exponentially. And in certainly the online, that has grown beyond what we would have expected or even known about 3, 4, 5 years ago. And now the policing context is very much in an online space. Whilst we look at the drugs market, we also have to look at the illicit goods, where do they source from, destination countries, and who are they exploiting? They exploit vulnerable people, such as children and migrants, but at the same time, there's also the terrorist attacks that take place as well. Organised crime networks now use income from one criminal activity to support another. So seemingly isolated crimes such as credit card fraud, counterfeiting, could be part of a much bigger network or even funding terrorist networks. And as policing, we have to understand those criminal networks, those criminal organizations, and actually how can we then disrupt them? Because the key for policing now, certainly in the online space, is disruption. And as part of that disruption methodology, we need to look at the prevention and the protect angle. So how do policing help and assist communities, which can be companies, individuals, to protect themselves from online attacks? There's an important role for policing to play, but also now there's a cross-society police for us all to take that responsibility. Much the same as I'm sat in my house at the moment, I have a burglar alarm on my house. I've taken that into account because I've assessed what goes on in my locality and feel that I need a burglar alarm to give me that added protection and make me less vulnerable to a burglar coming to my property. And much in the same way in the online space, we need to look at how and what we need to do to install those burglar alarms, all those protections to protect ourselves as companies. When we look at the vulnerabilities, what are the vulnerabilities then? There are multiple vulnerabilities that we have to protect ourselves from. And if I go on to my next slide now, we're going to look at the vulnerability that was presented during the COVID-19 piece and the cyber threats that came with that. What we saw when COVID-19 emerged, and for me in Singapore, it was back in January, we started seeing that virus and the way the virus was spreading. And we can make that alignment to the sort of online world as well about the way viruses spread and the different types of viruses. We analysed the cyber threats at that time, and we saw there was an alarming pace taking place where the criminals were being extremely agile. What we then saw is the criminals taking advantage of that COVID-19 situation. So they were looking at the infrastructure. How could they then manipulate the infrastructure of the internet and then turn that to their advantage for criminal, but also for profit and gain? We looked at a rise in malicious domains being set up. We looked at disruptive malware, ransomware, as we've already discussed. We looked at the online scams and phishing. They also were targeting the vulnerability of working from home. There was an immediate shift of a number of companies where their workforces had to shift to their home and work from home. So systems were moved remotely at short notice. And whilst that was done on the one sense to keep the businesses running, the security aspect wasn't always looked at. We also then looked at the misinformation side about how misinformation was spread during the COVID-19 situation. So why and what were the reasons behind that? Well, as we said now, we're all online, but there was almost a 3 to 5 year shift in a number of months about people going online and that connectivity and digital infrastructure that had to be used during and still being used during a lockdown period. There was also that thirst for information of COVID-19. So people were searching on the internet for updates around COVID-19. They were clicking on links. They were looking at emails and then clicking on the links, which the cyber criminals were sending out to them. And also there was that key element within this around the supplies for healthcare products. And that again gave an ideal scenario for criminals to exploit that. So as we saw then, cyber criminals took advantage of that phenomenon. They created those malicious domains. They committed various cyber crimes such as the online scams and phishing, and as well as spreading misinformation. Next slide, please. So what did we see then as the cybercrime trends? Well, these are the trends we've been seeing. And again, what we saw was a rise very steeply into certain areas. We saw that the cybercrime as a service, that easy entry for the criminals, expanded. We saw them target healthcare sector and associated supply chains, the online scams and phishes related to vaccines and medication, and then there's remote workforce vulnerabilities. And just to give some facts and figures around that side of it, we look at about 4.57 billion people are online currently. A single malware attack in 2018 cost more than $2.6 million at times. The estimates are cybercrime will cost the world $6 trillion annually by 2021. And if you look at the number of IoT devices, we'll reach 75.4 billion worldwide by 2025. We look at there's a whole number of different vulnerabilities there and ways that cyber criminals can then exploit those. When we look at some of the midterm protections, as I've said, that's cybercrime as a service. So effectively now, that's almost the criminals moving to that online service, the businesses that are setting up in the dark web or just going on and searching, looking for cybercrime. There is accessibility now to many, many people that if they want to commit crime, there is a service there enabling them to commit those crimes. We're also very concerned at the moment about the targeting of healthcare sectors and those supply chains, and that is ongoing. And I think looking forward now, where we look at the vaccines, they are going to be specifically targeted, because looking at companies that are developing those vaccines, they are going to be very susceptible to attacks from cyber criminals who want to get that data and want to get that information. So what was our response then during COVID-19 to these activities? Well, first of all, we set up a global malicious domains task force, and that was very much working with our private partners, also with industry, and also organizations such as ICANN, trying to identify and analyze the malicious domains that have been set up. We estimated over 200,000 malicious domains were set up, affecting more than 80 countries just in a 3-month period. We then looked at how we could deal with this and send the information out to our member countries. So as I said, INTERPOL, the global organization, we directly connect to 194 member countries. And one of the ways, when we identify attacks, or we identify new methodology that cyber criminals are operating, we pass that out to our member countries in a purple notice. And that's similar to a red notice. I expect some of you are aware of the red notices that INTERPOL has, and that's around wanted criminals. We also then use purple notices to explain new MOs and the way cyber criminals are operating, to alert member countries so they can then help their communities take preventive action and also protection. We then had cyber activity reports, where they are more specialized with specific pieces of information, where we may have identified or attributed criminality to one member country. There may be some infrastructure in that country, or there may be a number of victims within that country that would need further support and protection. We also provide operational support to our member countries from our base here in Singapore, and that is specifically supporting them if they have a cybercrime case. We also have the global awareness campaigns that we run, and some of you may have seen our Wash Your Cyber Hands, which was a very successful campaign during the COVID-19 situation. So one specific piece that was identified during the COVID-19 situation was maybe it wasn't so much directed at a healthcare institution because of COVID-19, but a specific ransomware attack on a number of hospitals, and one in particular out in the West Indies had all of its systems closed down effectively. Now, that then impacted them greatly in the way they were able to operate and the way they were able to conduct their business. And specifically at this time, you can just imagine the impact on a business when it's closed down virtually within minutes effect because of a ransomware attack. So we had to then support them with partners to help get them back online. But part of the challenge there was they hadn't got that prevention or that protection in place to start with. So it is sort of prevention is the cure, and protection is the cure in a lot of this for businesses and organizations. And that's one part of our global program we really, really try and push. And it's going back to my burglar alarm scenario. It's about how organizations can protect themselves. So as I said then, when we looked at the key threats, it's how do we connect that into the policing worldwide? How do we then pass that information out? So we ran a 4-week campaign about the different threats that we were seeing. And during that campaign, we managed to get that translated into about 21 languages. We delivered messages to local communities about those cyber threats that we were seeing. We reached over 7.5 million users online under that hashtag. And also we had over 10,000 mentions on Twitter. It also generated a number of media articles and blogs and posts and things like that, because a lot of this is about that awareness piece that we're trying to get out and we're trying to share. And again, this was very much about that prevention piece of cybercrime during the COVID-19 situation, which is exacerbated with so many of us spending so much time online. So this wasn't the first campaign we ran. In November last year, there was a huge, and there still is, with business email compromise problem globally. As many as you know, this is about that illegal access to the systems that can be done through social engineering, urgent requests about we need these bills paying now. And we see a lot of criminals operating in many different ways. There's that mass phishing sort of campaign that they run out and hoping people are going to click on links. But also then there's the more crafted campaigns where they select certain people in companies. So they might go after the finance officer or one of the CEOs and look to take over their accounts by accessing them and then manipulating those accounts to their advantage in order to get bills paid or funds diverted effectively. So that's one thing that we're seeing very much is still growing. And we're seeing the threats and where those coming from, certainly from the Africa region. We're seeing a number of sort of threat actors within that region targeting globally, but especially in the sort of Americas, but also in the Asia Pacific region as well. And again, now with that increase of workers being remotely, we see an increasing pressure on those businesses and those workforces. So a lot of this is about information. So when we look at the sort of threat assessments that we do, and these are available on the INTERPOL site, but we look at the ASEAN cyber threat assessment that we did back in 2020, and that was looking at the threats in the ASEAN region. Also, during the cybercrime period, then we've issued a COVID-19 impact around cybercrime. But when we look at companies such as Acronis, for example, issued a cyber readiness report that was released in September with some really fantastic information in there about stats about businesses that have been attacked. They're also looking at preparedness of companies to address those new risks to their infrastructure, endpoints and data. And that's very much the approach we're trying to take by collaborating with our private partners and also bringing that data in from policing and then turning that information into something that informs our communities effectively. Just for example, we surveyed all of our 194 member countries. We also have cybercrime expert working groups. We have our private partners as well, and also open source research, but bringing all of that data together. I think one thing that is a weakness for law enforcement is our statistics. So being able to analyze that data and bring the data in from those national countries and aggregate that data globally, we do see there's a massive underreporting of cybercrime. And one thing I'd really encourage people to do is if they are a victim of cybercrime, please ensure that you report it to your local law enforcement. Because again, if we start seeing those sort of different crimes being reported, we start seeing trends, and then we can help them start working and protecting people from those threats. That's very much in the ASEAN Cyber Threat Assessment I said that we released in 2020, and we specifically picked out a number of different areas in there. What we saw within that area was those sort of fraud and phishing campaigns within the region. We saw the criminals exploiting vulnerabilities, specifically around teleconferencing tools, but also about the remote working. And also, one of the big highlights it made for us was that lack of cybersecurity awareness and hygiene. And that was one of the main points that was made by organisations, but also policing in the region. So coming back to that, how do we do that prevention? How do we do that prevention? So again, as I said, we need to work about stats and the data. Part of what we're looking to do is aggregate that data in our cyber analytical platform. So we're looking to bring the data from the member countries, from the law enforcement, from their stats. We're looking to bring in the data from private partners as well. We're also looking to bring it in from police operations and also open source. And by able to aggregate all of that data, that helps us inform our threat picture. So that's the global response to cybercrime that we're looking at. We're looking at doing it on a regional basis across 5 regions. We're looking under 3 clear pillars. So our mandate is to reduce the global impact of cybercrime and protect communities for a safer world. So first of all, we need to understand the threat. We do that by collecting data and information. And in that intelligence cycle, we store it, we process it, we analyze it, we evaluate it, and then disseminate it. And then we disseminate it to countries and help and support them in their operational activities. And that's very much in that triangle approach on the right-hand side, is how we look to support those member countries that have really good capabilities and are able to do operations and activities. So as a neutral organisation, we are able to overcome some of those geopolitical problems and challenges about that sharing of data and information, and help target the actors in certain countries and then support other member countries where those victims are effectively. We also then look at our capabilities development, so the capabilities to support member countries in their work and their activities. And a lot of what we're doing now is that prevention. So for us, prevention is the key. Disruption as well, but we need to prevent, we need to detect, and then we need to investigate. And then we still look at those judicial outcomes. We still look to prosecute in countries where we can identify the cyber criminals, But effectively, if we manage to prevent in the first instance, that will then lessen the burden on us to do the prosecution side of it. So as I said, that's our mandate. And that is our main goal, to reduce the global impact of cybercrime and protect communities for a safer world. The key to this, though, is prevention. If we can protect businesses, if we can protect communities, and then we can prevent the cyber criminals actively carrying out their actions. I'm realistic in this. We're not going to stop cybercrime, but what we can do is certainly reduce it, and also the impact that it has on communities. The key, as I said, is prevention, the protection of infrastructure, the protection of data. That's what we're looking at. So thank you very much for your time today. I'm looking forward to the panel later on, and I'll now hand it back to our host. Thank you.
A very insightful presentation from you. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is actually Ken So, the CIO at BH Global and CEO at Athena Dynamics. So Ken has more than 28 years of working experience in the ICT industry. So in BH Global, he has spearheaded various digital transformation initiatives internally. Alongside that, Mr. So has also initiated and driven the transformation of BH Global's IT department. Since the inception of Athena Dynamics in mid-2014, he has contributed more than 100 thought leadership speaking and papers in numerous industry conferences, press, and media. Over to you, Ken.
And hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Let me open up the slide. Okay. All right. Hi, all. Thanks for joining us in this webinar. And I'm truly humbled to be given this opportunity to share this. Yeah. Okay. I believe it is okay with the slide now. Yes. Yes, I'm humbled to be given this opportunity to be able to share this thought leadership, and truly warming to be able to continue such learning and sharing in the COVID situation. Right. As the theme implied, I'm looking a lot into the statewide cyber protection perspective. This is not a new topic, but of course, then as we go into the industry so far, we started to realize that there are quite a fair bit of consideration, which is more in the perspective of intertwined nature of businesses, and then seeing the cyber protection in that perspective that is not quite there. So let's jump straight into the presentation. All right. In our view, if you look at today's protection, there are a lot of mention in the critical infrastructure. Sometimes we call it CII, which consists mainly of the OT and also the critical IT assets that people are protecting. And there are a lot of innovation, a lot of ideas in that. And then we have the other sector, which is a smaller, so-called the smaller companies. We call it SME, some call it SMB. And then they were also a fair bit of tools that they use. Unfortunately, today, the way we see is that the ideas and innovation is very sectorial based, that it is not seen in the collective perspective. So as we know, in Singapore, we have the 5 pillars of defense for the longest time until early last year, that a new digital defense pillar is added, right? So as per Craig and Willis mentioned just now, a lot of mention about the situation aspect of cyber security and protection, the COVID situation coming along, right? Who knows that the new pillar will come out by way of the bio perspective of protection and security going forward. So if you look at Singapore's critical, the CII protection master plan, there were classification concisely into 11 CII. This is very good by way of leadership, by way of the focuses into the area of protection that we should look at. All right. Unfortunately, the mention of such in SME was not quite gelling. The way we see is that there was mention, but then I reckon that there are certain work to be done to see how this whole thing can be seen in a more holistic and gelling perspective. So we know that SME is very important in Singapore. And some of the basic statistics here, which I believe is not new to many, they are actually 99%. 99% of the companies registered in Singapore are actually SMEs. All right, and they actually hired about 70% of people, contributing 40% of GDP annually to Singapore. So in my course of work, I had this opportunity, quite a fair bit of opportunity to talk to quite a lot of the local slang, we call it tauke, which means typically very accomplished SME bosses. They have company size of like 30 over people, but they are very comfortable. They are running businesses that's doing pretty well. Pre-COVID time, I visited them and I talked to them, quite a fair bit of them. Many a time when they look at me, it's like, it's not very receptive. They don't see cybersecurity so seriously. The immediate response to them is, hey, come on, I'm not a bank, you know, why should I worry about all these things? And I had shared with many a classic example of one boss that's driving a Lamborghini that find that a firewall is too expensive for them. So the mindset is a challenge for a start. But I reckon that situation is getting better as the awareness is getting higher, as more incidents actually happen, and they actually learn from all this situation. So other factors like difficult to integrate, which is the technical aspect of things, and they also see no urgency, like what I mentioned just now, and also the lack of skill set in such implementation. So all this adds up. And to add on to that is, if you look at the cyber markets, there are so many offerings and propositions. So then how do they start? What is their first step? Whether they got the right thing, the fitting and appropriate proposition for their unique landscape of protection in each company. Because every company is so different. Either they were under protect or overkilling. Neither of them is a right situation they would like to end up in. So how to do the right sizing for each company then would be quite important. So if you look at this whole statewide perspective, summarized into these three entities that I look at, the market is of course looking for protection. They're looking for services, and we see it as end customer at the moment. So then we also have them working with the larger company at the right side, and also the smaller SME. So they are basically trading, right, doing businesses. The interesting part is that this whole thing cannot be seen in silo, because SME, they work quite closely with the larger company as well, as maybe a subcontractor, maybe a bidding project. So you see there are a lot of documents and a lot of information that is flowing between them. They are very intertwined. So we can't take care of the security at one end, but forget the other end is actually part of the ecosystem. So we can see that if there is a good initiative to help seeing this in a more statewide perspective and gel them into a way that solutions and propositions are palatable for both sides, I believe that will improve the situation for the cybersecurity posture statewide. Okay, so I know it's not easy. It's easier said than done. Of course, there are obstacles, and I mentioned about those obstacles in the SME side, but we need to start from somewhere. So if we look at the cyber landscape, and the cyber protection principle is the usual three perspective: people, process, technology, or sometimes we call it the platform. All right. So and today I see there's another dimension that's coming in, which is the situation side. COVID is one, and the phishing and such that I mentioned just now is a very well manifested example of things that may happen. So for this keynote, I will not touch on the other two aspects. It's a very wide subject. If let's say we just focus on the technology aspect, the way we see the protection technology is basically detection-based technology and non-detection. With all this in a collective manner, it will protect very strongly. So the detection technology side, we have the hygiene, traditional method of A/B sandboxing and such. And today we have more advanced AI-based monitoring, like binary sets, firewall protectors, and such things. There are a lot of innovation going on. So detection side has contributed a lot to the protection posture of a lot of large, small companies. There's a non-detection paradigm in our view, which very much, in a way, actually helps at this moment, mainly larger companies. So the question now is how to bring all this to be palatable and workable in the SME area. And I don't think it's not impossible. We have been trying. Either we cloudify the solution, either we make it into a different tier of solutioning. There are various ways to do that. All right. So I won't go into specific area. I have link that you can see the video. It's supposed to be a very concise presentation. If we look at just binary sense, today we know that we are not just digitally isolated. COVID has pushed us into a physical isolation world, which is very unique and unprecedented. All this while we talk about digital transformation, business transformation, and all sorts of transformation. And they are all driven supposedly by the C-level, by the leadership of the company. Unfortunately, today is driven by COVID-19 situation. Why I say that? Because we really come to a situation whereby we really need to innovate or evaporate. We have to digitalize big and small business, even small SME business, selling clothes, fashion, even hawkers, shopfront businesses. They really need to go online to survive. And going forward, we don't know whether there will be more other forms of pandemic-related situation that will evolve. So in Singapore, I see quite comforting initiatives coming from various forms, either government or business federation. They are actually helping all these small businesses very well. And to go online, we can't run away from having like the likes of mobile apps, website, and this is different from traditional businesses anymore. Because traditional businesses are talking about shopfront, and you're seeing your neighborhood or your country's people. Whereas the moment you go into mobile apps or webs, you do not know whether the customers are coming here, visiting your site with genuine shopping purposes or just malicious purposes. Right? So you're facing the entire world. So one of the area is we're looking at, which is helping quite a fair bit of SME right now, is so-called binary sense technology. So long and short of it is that many applications, when they do digital transformation, they go online, right? So they would check their code, scan their source code, and then unfortunately, they forget that the compiler is another application. They're not perfect. It's not Iron Man, so robust. The binary code that is produced is also imperfect. So there may be some gaps. The interesting thing is that then the source code is checked, but it's a binary that's deployed in a production environment. So we advocate the checking on both sides, and we advocate things like binary code review on top of the traditional protection. So this will take care of things like binary plugin that you do not have source code, or small businesses that when they buy third-party software, they don't have the source code, and they have to run this and to run their business on this. That could be challenging, but this would help them. And it is good that we have been working with us, like for example, Singapore government to promote and to raise the awareness of this aspect. Yeah. So coming back to the non-detection side, again, I think in the interest of time, I will not go into detail because these are all quite broad topic, some of which is like isolation and containment, right? Where application is run transparently, the user will not know it in a container. So when there's anything, infection or even ransomware, it's contained inside that zone, not in your real PC. This is one kind of technology that we can consider under the non-detection technologies. The other one is quite a mouthful. It's called content disarm reconstruction. What it means is that any documents is actually transformed and reconstructed reconstructed back to the purest form to remove all the impurities, whether it is a virus or not, it doesn't matter. So it's a kind of whitelisting thought paradigm that only the core purest form of the documents is actually transferred to the protected segment. All right. So all this, at this moment, we can see that there are a lot in larger organizations. They are in CII, but we see a possibility to bring this into the smaller companies. And this is a dream whereby we can put them and see this whole implementation together. What I would see, and I think will work very well, is the 80-20 kind of perspective. To actually, I'm not too sure whether it's something which is quite large in effort, but to analyze what is the actual important supply chain. For example, smaller companies that usually submit a bidding tender document to larger government agency or larger companies. So we can zoom into this and work out something that is more holistic, providing actionable insight and also a blended supply chain perspective. And today, as I mentioned, there are various initiatives, government related, and it's helping them. Yeah. So I believe we can take this further and create an ecosystem that has actually collectively raised the security posture at a different level. Okay, just a quick intro of ourselves. I belong to a group of Maritime Supply Chain Group, BH Global, which is about 50 over years in Singapore, main board listed. I joined them as a CIO about 6 years ago, and we realized that security posture is challenging, and then we found out various useful techniques and tools, and that's how we spin off the group IT department into another SME, which is a subsidiary that deal with security. So we always say that we eat our own dog food. We use a group company to implement and test products, and if it's good, we actually put it under Athena Dynamics and sell it and share it with the industry. All right. So it's more a SME for SME initiative, and we hope we can do more and contribute more to the community. Yeah, that's my last slide, and I hope these initiatives and sharing will be useful for you directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much. I'm sure the information is going to be very useful for a lot of SMB owners out there, right?
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. So before we get into our panel discussion, we have a very brief demonstration of our new product that we are publicly announcing this month, Acronis CyberProtect 15. This is the on-premise version of Acronis CyberProtect Cloud offering we have launched back in April of this year. And this will enable our value-added resellers and partners to deliver a fully fledged suite of cybersecurity capabilities to complement our world-beating data protection solution, Acronis Cyber Backup with Active Protection. Here to give you a 5-minute tour is Dan Cardno, Acronis Senior Solution Manager. Acronis Senior Solution Engineer. Over to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks team. Hello and welcome everyone. We're going to take a few minutes here to explain some of the features of CyberProtect and the real-world applications of them. First of all, for anyone not intimately familiar with the way Acronis provides backup protection, it comes in the form of a plan. A plan is essentially a package of rules that determines what should be backed up and the times and conditions that apply. CyberProtect builds on that and integrates security and controls in the same process using the same look and feel. So here I'm just going to disable the backup plan selection and talk about some of the new and enhanced features. Before I get into them, let me zoom in a little to help illustrate what I'm talking about. So first of all, we can manage the antivirus and anti-malware components. Here you'll find all of the options and settings you'd expect from such a feature. For instance, we can tune how Active Protection deals with threats. If you're not already familiar with Active Protection, it's a feature that monitors for and determines how we deal with malware attacks. Take the scenario where we notice files being encrypted and renamed, possibly as part of a ransomware attack. Do we want to inform someone on the admin team, stop the process from continuing, or automatically roll back the changes using system cache? To guarantee consistency, anti-tamper controls are built in so that malicious software can't stop or suspend the underlying services in an attempt to circumnavigate and perpetuate the attack. There are, of course, configurable options that relate to real-time protection and the configuration of periodic system scans that extend to the protection of removable hardware, very important in this case. URLs can be filtered either based on predefined categories, such as hacking or gambling, or by adding them individually to the list of exclusions. Here, we can add exceptions to the categories in place, or add URLs in isolation to be blocked. Windows components can be managed through the UI as well. Windows Defender and Security Essentials can not only be configured, but also tracked through the CyberProtect console. Having worked in large, fragmented IT departments in the past, I particularly like the vulnerability assessment and the patch management feature. The vulnerability assessment will check each machine where the plan is assigned, ensure the software installed is up to date, and consequently there are no open doors for malicious software or bad actors. You can choose the scope for assessment and also build conditions into the schedule. For example, ensuring a task is run on startup if it were to miss its original scheduled start for whatever reason. Where there are vulnerabilities found, the patch manager can work to ensure necessary patches are applied and security is maintained. This can be done automatically or as a staged manual process. And we'll see what that looks like in just a second. But also note there is an option to perform a backup prior to applying any patches. The final thing to mention in this section is the data protection map. This is a means to identify any critical file types that may not currently be backed up. The most common use case for this is one a lot of people are currently experiencing with working from home, where data is being saved to a common folder, and that folder alone is the one being backed up, purely for the purpose of efficiency. The data protection map will identify any files that fall outside of that working directory and could therefore impact production if it were lost. And to illustrate what it looks like when the plan has executed, we can start with the Software Management tab. The patches selection will show all of the available patches and their approval status. Notice as well how we can also deploy patches on an ad hoc basis, particularly useful in the case of high priority issues. Additionally, you'll see some new widgets on the dashboard. They tell the story of security in one neatly packaged central user interface. Like always, the dashboard will centralize all of the pertinent information into one place, for immediate, color-coded reference to all areas of concern. And finally, I wanted to point out the threat feed. This is such a cool feature to help stay protected against a number of different, often unforeseen dangers. Here, we can see some suggestions for dealing with potential malware and ransomware attacks, where you can review and act on the recommendations given. So, hopefully that gives an insight into some of the useful components. And with that, I'll hand back over to the conference.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. I hope this brief demo has given you a flavor of the power of the combination of Acronis Cyber Backup and Acronis Cyber Protect. We expect it to enable our partners to very efficiently deliver a range of cyber protection services to their customers. With sophisticated integration at the business, technology, agent, and user interface level that will simplify the work of your technical staff and your salesperson alike. We hope you see the same opportunity that Acronis does to help your customers address their very pressing cyber protection needs, and stand ready to show you the platform's capabilities in a much greater detail. All right, so now it's time to move on to the next session of the day. We have a very experienced group of thought leaders on hand to discuss the topic of how business can improve their cybersecurity posture with better security technology, more sophisticated use of AI and automation, all with an eye on reducing costs. So first off, we have in our panel, Willis Lim, Deputy Director of the National Cyber Threat Analysis Center. Al Pelislen, Head of Technical Innovation Partnership for Williams, working across the business, assists with technical partnership management and business development. So a bit more information about Al. Prior to short stints at the head of partnership for RobotAce, the world's first fully autonomous motorsport series, and global director of sales and IoT at AT&T, Al's previous experience comes from Formula One, including 11 years at Red Bull Racing. Firstly, as their head of CAD PLM, and latterly as their head of technical years partnership, managing all of the team technical and innovation partners. Al is a chartered engineer, a fellow of the IMAC-E, and has a wealth of experience as a mechanical design engineer within the aerospace and automotive sectors, prior to becoming a senior manager within the world of motorsports. On the third in our panelists, we have Nick Grubenikov. He's our Chief Development Officer in Acronis. So Nick is a well-known information technology leader with extensive practical experience in both operational and strategic management. Next up, we have Director Jones, Cybercrime Director at INTERPOL. And we also have Ken So, CIO at BH Global and CEO at Athena Dynamics. So let's move on to the questions, shall we? So for the first question, we'd like to address this question to Al. So Al, cybersecurity strategy started moving away from perimeter defense focus to protecting data wherever it resides some years ago. What tactics has your organization deployed to support this shift of focus? And where else are you trying to drive a more holistic approach to data protection and cybersecurity in your company operations and culture? Al, please.
Yeah, so hi, Alvin. And firstly, thanks, Alvin. Thanks, Sergei and Acronis for inviting me along to join this panel. Yeah, really good question. So I think, like most organizations, our security infrastructure really has many layers of defense. And whether you're looking at secure connectivity and networks, to securing all of our endpoints and monitoring malicious or suspicious behavior, through to backup and storage security, both on-premise and in the cloud, courtesy of our partnership with Acronis. All of these solutions really form part of the comprehensive cybersecurity infrastructure, but really our first line of defense with cybersecurity is our people. And this relates to both education, but also to culture, something that we're very proud of within the Williams Racing team. I guess to coin a phrase from Acronis, it's about both our organization and our people being cyber fit. So when we look at the people aspect of cybersecurity, we focus firstly on education and making sure that all of our people understand the threat landscape. They understand the threats and risks that they could potentially face by being exposed to or identifying, threats of malicious activity and malware, etc. Everything we've heard about already on this event. But it's also about highlighting the value of the data and the IP that we're asking them to help us protect, and showing them the importance of ensuring that it remains secure at all stages of the process, end to end. But I think the bit that's important alongside education is the culture piece. And so we focus heavily on creating a culture within our organization that helps everyone feel a sense of responsibility towards cybersecurity. So it's about giving our people the reason why to play their part and become part of this cybersecurity defense solution for the business. And that's about making them feel that the data is their own, as well as it's part of the company's data, and that we're all here in this team to help each other and take care of each other. And, I think it's important to say that it's not about causing panic or alarm with our people, making them feel as though they're continually under threat, but it's about empowering them, giving them as much information as possible, making an environment where they feel confident and safe, that they can go about their daily activities, knowing that the security model is there to protect them. And so, it really does start and end with our people. Where I fit into all of this, and you'll probably appreciate that I'm surrounded by a panel of very experienced IT experts, way more capable than I am. But my role is really to build partnerships and work across the business to forge partnerships, like the partnership we have with Acronis, so that they can bring their expertise, their support, their products into the team, deliver the very best tools possible across the estate. And that then allows our people to carry on and do their best work in a safe and secure environment. So yeah, cybersecurity really starts and ends with our people, but it's underpinned by this comprehensive cybersecurity tool and infrastructure that we get from our partners like Acronis.
Thank you, Al. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
So let's move on to the second question. I'd like to address this question to Director Jones. So Director Jones, cybercrime used to be a relatively small-scale cottage industry with very short-term tactical goals. Deflecting an attack to a less well-defended victim was good enough. But in recent years, cybercrime has evolved into something more like a legitimate software as a service access industry. In software development, distribution, marketing, and support. How have your cybersecurity defenses evolved to respond to longer horizon, multi-pronged, and more persistent attack? Director Jones, please.
Thank you very much for the question. I'd just challenge one point when you mentioned legitimate service as cyber criminals. All that one, it's actually not a legitimate service in that effectively. But I think that's a really good point, because what has happened is organised crime groups, criminals have effectively created that ecosystem, whereas before they may have worked individually. They are like any business, they're evolving. And they are seeing that they can have different departments set up effectively to create a service. And people can then buy that service, as we see in any business. And in some ways, it's a very lucrative service. I think what we've seen is that initial, and there's still the volume attacks. So those are those ones which are a sort of a scattergun approach. It's almost like someone walking down a street and trying all the car handles of doors to see which one's open and they can break into. That's the sort of first approach. But as we've seen on some of the other presentations, the cyber criminals, and I don't want to use the word sophisticated, but maybe they are becoming more targeted in their approach. And that's what we are seeing effectively. So they are looking at those companies and doing an assessment of what data or what information do they hold. And then how can they then extract the most value from that data and information? Now, in one sense, it might be a network intrusion where they just spend time once they're within a company's network, going around, if you like, opening every filing cabinet, looking to see what's in there and what they can then extract. On the other hand, we then look at, they just do a straightforward ransomware. So that's like your normal blackmail, where they'll stop an organization business operating and then hold them to ransom for funding. And again, we were seeing a bit of a scattergun approach to that about 3 or 4 years ago, where there would be emails set out, you would click on a link, and then that sort of virus would get into the system. Whereas now they are spending time, they're crafting those attacks, they're identifying key people in organizations, might have key positions, but more importantly, the access. So once, and if they're able to compromise those people in the organizations, that gives them greater access and the ability to extract more data and information from those companies. So I think we're seeing this now on a number of different levels. I know volume crime still exists in the physical sense, and now it exists very much in the online sense. The criminals are looking at, and I think we're seeing this blending now around, we use cyber dependent, cyber enabled, cyber fraud, cyber scams. In policing, we're very good at trying to get a definition or a terminology on something. But when we're doing our investigations, we have to ensure that it is linked to specific legislation in a country. So when we talk about hacking, well, what does that actually mean? I know in the UK, for example, you cannot commit theft within the online space. You have to use the Computer Misuse Act. So again, trying to get countries to look at their legislation is very important for us at Interpol, because what we're trying to do is harmonise some of the legislation. So again, when we're looking at the investigations or operations that we support, we can say, well, if it's happening in one country and the evidence sits in another country, when we gather that evidence from another country, how can we then use it in the other first country where the victims are or where the offenders are to then do the prosecutions? So again, for us, that's a bit of a longer term strategy around how we develop that. And I think coming back to the whole purpose and what we're talking about here is prevention actually is the key for all of this. It's if we can prevent those attacks, you know, and stop them being able to get into companies and organizations, that's absolutely key. But I think going forward now, for me, AI is going to be for the way we all develop. So on the one hand, we will be looking at it as the way we can prevent cybercrime or, you know, the attacks, but also the criminals will be looking at how they can use AI more effectively to actually automate those attacks and craft those attacks. So I think we're still going to carry on with this cycle going forward, where someone will develop something, it will then be used for good, so to speak, to help protect companies, but then the criminals will jump onto it and then use that as an opportunity and look at the different vulnerabilities, or the criminals will identify that first of all and use that, and then industry will have to respond to that. I think finally that the challenge law enforcement has is us being agile enough. So how agile is law enforcement and able to pivot and change the way we work? So very much at the moment, we're seeing how we can combine our cyber expertise with the financial expertise and draw those experts together to follow the money effectively. Because if the criminals are after the money, we need to prevent and disrupt that money flow. So that's an area where we're really looking to go in towards now, about preventing that flow of money and that finance getting into the hands of the criminals. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jones. Very informative. I'd like to move on to the third question. And for this question, perhaps Ken, if you could address it. This is with regards to AI and machine learning. So cyber criminals are investing in machine learning and artificial intelligence, right? And they're refining and automating their attacks. Meanwhile, businesses are struggling to manage increasingly complex cybersecurity defenses, and the sheer volume of alerts are growing from a growing network of sensors at the OS, application, network, and endpoint level. To what extent do you think that you could take advantage of AI and automation technologies to improve your ability to detect, defend against, and respond to such kind of cyber attacks? Ken, please.
Sure, Alvin. If I refer back to the total cyber strategy of detection and non-detection, the AI portion in our framework falls under the detection paradigm. If you look at the AI approach towards detection, it has its merits, but there is also a very interesting observation that it is suitable under certain kind of scenario. A lot of the AI technologies works very well, especially like understanding the context of businesses, understanding the context of operation. And then when they do self-learning, typically they will create a baseline pattern of life, and then they will actually be able to identify anomalies. And in a way, there are also a lot of fine-tuning technologies that is able to come in to help them to solve and reduce the issue of false positive, right? So these are quite useful in the way that in the past, we do not have these technologies. We have secure email gateway as one example that probably it will take every email individually, so it doesn't have the sense of context. Whereas now you even have email gateway that is AI-based, where then is able to observe and learn the pattern of life even in the email communications. So when something is not right, coupled with the appropriate CTI, as in cyber threat intelligence, it comes to a very, very strengthened kind of posture. However, just now I mentioned that there is another area which is quite interesting. Is it's not easy to look at because we have an observation in a real situation whereby everybody remember the Kim Trump summit, and when the two VIPs actually touched down at Singapore, the cyber attack coming with them is suddenly spiked you know, so they not only come with all sort of attention, but it comes with cyber attack as well. So then when they left, all this actually subsided tremendously. So I'm not too sure whether how under this type of scenario, AI would come into play. So I would say that it is very case-based kind of consideration where AI can be used in certain area, maybe even like, especially in SCADA protection. We personally has done some kind of baselining for SCADA protection that's very, very useful. In fact, the SCADA owner was very impressed in the way that when we do analytics of historian or even network analytics, it is OEM agnostic. So it's able to give them a plant-wide analytics of the behavior of the maybe power plant. And then when there is something that is not behaving the right way, the AI engine will be able to alert. And this doesn't only address cyber attack. It could be a maintenance or performance issue. Maybe this valve is not working quite right relative to the other pipes. And it knows by reporting this, the valve is going to break down in 3 months' time. And you are able to do that, the repair and maintenance before things actually happen. And for SCADA, it's very important because to them, availability of services is key. Yeah. So in a nutshell, my view is AI is a very strong area that we can leverage for protection. However, we have to consider the context of the business.
Thank you, Ken. Totally agree with you there. Thank you very much. So next up, the fourth question, we have it for Nikolai. Why are existing solutions insufficient and why should customers replace them with integrated solutions? Nikolai would like to comment on that.
Alvin, do we have some supporting slides which I sent? Yep, can you open it? Thank you. So from our point of view, and I represent Acronis R&D organization who has developed Acronis cyber protection solution, you can't believe just in one layer of protection because none of the products they deliver for you 100% detection rate. So in any case, it will be some cyber criminals, cyber groups who will penetrate your organization in different ways, and at the end, they will find a gap in your protection. This is why it's so important to have integrated prevention, detection, response, recovery, and forensic. In this situation, 99.9% of threats can be stopped on earlier stage, prevention and detection, by different techniques, antivirus-based, vulnerability assessment, URL filtering-based, but you will need to have additional way to automatically restore from backups and in necessary run additional copy of production servers in disaster recovery environment. And all this should be incorporated in one unified solution. Only such solution can provide you 100% protection against any threats. So even your door locks are damaged by cyber criminals, you will have insurance to recover, your stuff, or you will have some DR services like second house you can live in while your house will be restored with your insurance. And next, can you click please? It's very important to also have integrated solution. So power of integration is key. If you have just point solutions, like one antivirus plus one backup staying separately, they can talk to each other. And in Acronis Cyber Protect, this is unique product. When we build it, we focused on this talking between components. When you have anti-malware solution and if it detects viruses in real time, it can call backup and ask for big files to recover them. And in case of patch management, there is a small chance, maybe 0.1%, then a specific machine in your organization will not survive patching on one application or operating system, and you will need to recover it back. How better it will be if you have a recent copy of data, not a backup which actually 8 hours or 24 hours old. And in this situation, this is what CyberProtect can ensure, because before administrator click on a patch button or it will be run automatically, our product make a backup slice immediately. And if you need to restore in this 0.1% of cases, you will have the most accurate and most up-to-date copy of your data. So integration is key. And next one. And it's also important to have integration not only on a back end, but also on front end. So usually if you have point solutions, anti-malware, backup, patch management, maybe system management, you need to look at different consoles to get information you can see on just one screen, as you can see here on the slide, about how many megabytes, gigabytes were backed up, how many malware were blocked, URLs, malicious URLs blocked, and how many applications, vulnerable applications found, and patches ready to be installed or already installed in your system. So such powerful integration allows you much easier way, and for MSP technicians, much more workloads to be supported by just one technician. And can you give me one example, because it was also one of the questions from the audience regarding what a real advantage compared to the top solutions like CrowdStrike, right? Many of you know about CrowdStrike Falcon, and actually if you look at it, this non-integrated nature and not covering end-to-end threats allows customers of CrowdStrike to be potentially under risk of getting data loss, or be able to expose like password leaks, or be able to become a malware spreading point, or device performance degradation because no crypto mining dedicated protection, or no protection of applications, which we're actually currently using Zoom application against targeted attack. If the whole system is penetrated, there is no dedicated application level protection. And all these attack vectors, they are covered by CyberProtect as the only integrated solution on the market right now. That's all from my answer.
Thank you, Nikolai. We actually have a very interesting comment from one of the questions that the audience has put together. So maybe I would like maybe Nick to provide some comments. So the question is this: what advice would you give a freshman interested in entering the field of cybersecurity?
I believe for a newbie freshman who is coming into inter cybersecurity space, I think the question is not about individual, but about a company, say managed service provider who wants to become a managed security service provider. It makes sense to look at the solution which allows you to cover different attack vectors and provide your customers a holistic view of protection. In this situation, you do not need to learn different products and think, okay, how to build these scenarios yourself, and you need to recover data after a successful attack from a product, but to be able to do all this threat attack modeling through one product. So this will actually keep your resources minimal and the level of protection maximum in case of potential damage, and covers the maximum number of issues which can happen in your customer environments.
Thank you, Nikolai. Hopefully this helps the audience with that response. So let's move on to the last question that we have for the panel, question number 5. So we're talking about, the question is actually for Willis Lim, Mr. Lim. So ignoring what you see on the screen, so how has the pandemic changed your approach to data protection and cybersecurity? What changes you have made since the start of the crisis do you see surviving into the aftermath? So we are talking about pandemic situation.
Oh, that's a tough one. I would rather answer the one on the screen. But let me try.
Yeah.
Let me just try. I think I can speak quite generally about how the pandemic has changed the overall landscape. I think COVID-19 has compelled organizations as well as governments to mount ad hoc arrangements and improvisations to contain its spread while trying to maintain business continuity at the same time. Now, what it's also done is, of course, to quicken the pace of digitization. I think many experts have mentioned that we essentially crammed 5 years worth of digitization into the space of a few months. But we have often done this by improvising and relying on digital infrastructure, which may not always be properly secured. And this creates new attack services or broadens existing ones. So during this time, I think CSA felt it was very important to increase public outreach, and we pushed out advisories to businesses and the public, including tips on secure remote work policies, using online meeting platforms safely, as well as other measures to defend against COVID-19 related malicious activities. We also collaborated with our Ministry of Health and the Smart Nation and Digital Office Group in Singapore to secure applications and online platforms that were implemented to support contact tracing and other important functions. And certainly Singapore, CSA and Singapore were not the only ones to do so. Many governments and organizations all over the world also took proactive steps and measures to secure these COVID-19 mandated ad hoc arrangements as well as improvisations. In fact, I believe Acronis itself pushed out some new security solutions to support work from home and telecommuting in the previous and the past few months. But I think it's important to make one last point, and this is a point that my chief executive had made earlier, and this is beyond merely expanding this attack surface. The widespread adoption of telecommuting measures and practices just to simply get work done during this period means that we all have increased our risk appetite during COVID-19 situation. And as we already know, life won't return to normal, and practices like telecommuting or large virtual teleconferencing platforms like this one may very well become the norm from now on. The question is whether we have understood the risks that such practices entail, or are we moving into a new status quo in terms of cybersecurity risk? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. Right, so we have asked our panelists to also provide us, some tips so that the audience can benefit from, the takeaway if they are just going to take away just one valid point from this webinar. And Mr. Lim actually mentioned that given the ever-evolving nature of cyber threats, robust cybersecurity practices remains an organization's best defense. Mr. Lim, do you have anything else to add on to this?
No, nothing other than to thank the organizers for a wonderful sharing session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. And from Al, he says, organizational culture is as important as the education of your people in regards to your overall cybersecurity. Al, any further comments?
No, I think I probably covered some of that in my first answer anyway, but yeah, just a big thanks to Acronis for the support and inviting us along today.
Thank you, Al. And from Nikolai, business continuity in modern world can be achieved only by integrated cyber protection solution instead of separate backup security and system management solutions. Nikolai, do you want to add some comments on that?
I think I covered it in my speech here. This is my clear view, but this is the only way how to target the real difficult cyber threats.
Okay, thank you, Nikolai. And finally, from Ken, he mentioned that do not just detect, educate, isolate, sanitize, and govern. Ken, maybe you want to shed some light on what this is.
Yes, I reckon that mine is the shortest. So yeah, I have articulated this in the deck that I shared. In essence, if you read the statement, it is still based on people, process, technologies. And I would like to also qualify that when this statement doesn't just detect, it doesn't mean that detection is not good or not necessary. Detection is very important. And we can see there are a lot of detection technologies today are helping a lot of industry to actually prevent all this trouble from happening. We are actually looking at the non-detection side that I mentioned, those paradigm, which will definitely help to augment the portion when advanced threat today become so difficult to detect. And those technology is supposed to cover the gaps and complement what detection technology today may not be able to fulfill.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for elaborating. All right, once again, I would like to thank all our panelists, Al, Nikolai, Ken, Director Jones, and Mr. Lim for their time participating in our panel discussion. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the final section of our agenda today. And we finally have a last keynote by Frank Dixon from IDC. So Frank is a Program Vice President for Security and Digital Trust at IDC. The team he leads covers network security, endpoint security, cybersecurity, analytics, intelligence, response, and orchestration, identity and digital trust, legal risk and compliance. Frank's own research focuses on endpoint security, identity and access management, authentication, threat analytics, and protection of architecturals and business models as they undergo digital transformation. All right, over to you, Frank.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks a lot. Hey, I do know that I wasn't the guy that was originally supposed to be here. My expert on data security, Robin Westervelt, was going to be here. She's unexpectedly out of the office, but I'm more than happy to jump in, right? Because this is a theme I tend to talk about a lot, right? Because if we think about what we're doing moving forward, if we can go to the next slide, right? There's very much this theme going on within all of IT, and this is rethinking. And so as we were going through our futurescape discussions, which is basically we prognosticate what we think is going to happen in the future, we put together, all these prognostications at IDC as we're talking about security, right? You'll see one of these on the board, and it's like, by 2022, budgets for modern defined, secure access solutions such as software-defined perimeter will quadruple as companies rethink their approaches to remote access, as flaws in legacy VPN remote access-centric solutions are illuminated by the massive work-from-home migrations. And as I presented this, my peers in other technologies and other groups such as cloud, such as work at home, such as compliance, there was this constant theme. Everybody's having this constant concept called rethink. So if we think about this concept of rethinking, if we can move forward to the next slide, this rethinking premise extends to security, right? Work at home migrations and COVID, it didn't really do anything different. It caused us to go, whoa, and step back and rethink. And instead of like that incremental process to addressing security, what it did was make us realize, hey, our environment has changed and maybe the way we were doing things wasn't the right way to do it, right? Because if you think about complexity, if we go to the next slide, security by default is a complex beast, right? And if we think about it, here are the 5 key drivers, right? We talk about the sophistication of cyber miscreants growing, right? And it's only getting stronger and more complex and smarter. Serguei went into some really great examples of some of the tricks that ransomware pulls, right? And as we look to defend against that malware, we're seeing this proliferation of security tool sets, right? Let's throw more technology at the problem. And of course, as we're throwing more technology at the problem, the environment's changing, right? So different devices, phones, tablets, computers, right? On-prem, in the cloud, hybrid cloud, right? It's going everywhere, which kind of results in this, what we call the death of perimeter. No longer is our people and data and applications all on-prem, right? We've got people outside the prem, people inside the prem, data outside the prem, applications outside the prem, right? So the perimeter has died, and we've got this continued growth of compliance regulations, right? And it's not like we can think about security just in a vacuum, right? Because we don't control the world, right? If we think about the way that we look at the environment, if we go to the next slide, right? Really what's going on is security is the tail, and what's wagging the tail is the dog, and that dog is digital transformation, right? How we are injecting technology into our processes to increase our ability to deliver empathy at scale to our customers, right? To decrease costs, to improve our agility, right? And as we look at this hyper connectivity driven by this digital transformation, IDC really doubled down on this. And if we want to look at some of the ways that we're describing this digital transformation, if we can go to the next slide, right? IDC in 2019 outlined these agendas for this digital transformation. And as we look at, this digital transformation goes in many different themes, right? Delivering empathy at scale, delivering trust, delivering connectivity, ensuring experiences, right? And this isn't just analysts speak, right? We actually went and verified this. So at the beginning of the year, what we did was survey our end users. If we can go to the next slide. And we said, hey, CEOs, do these agenda items link to where you're going? And you'll see the vast majority of CEOs validate that, yes, they have initiatives associated with trust. Yes, they have initiatives associated with how work is changing. Yes, they have initiatives associated with how connectivity is changing, right? And all of these critical items are what's creating this environment, as Serguei talked about, complexity, right? And remember, our fundamental component there, or our fundamental premise, is complexity is the enemy of security. Now, as we think about the way that these agendas are changing, if we go to the next slide, right? I'm reminded of a guy by the name of Rube Goldberg, right? And so what Rube Goldberg was, he was a cartoonist, he was a sculptor, he was an engineer, but he really had these creative cartoons about connecting dissimilar systems that weren't necessarily meant to be connected, right? To create some sort of, address some sort of remedial task. In this cartoon, right, we show the self-operating napkin, right, of all of these systems that are now connected to create this self-operating napkin. Now, if we think about this cartoonist, right, yes, it's funny. Yes, it's somewhat satirical. But if we go to the next slide, we'll note that, that's digital transformation, right? What we're doing is connecting operations and HR and sales in these interconnected systems by which the things that weren't previously meant to be connected are now connected. And those connections aren't exactly perfect, right? Because all of these connections are essentially done with an API. And if one half of that API breaks, both halves break, right? And if we have cascading APIs, when one breaks, we can bring down the whole system. So this idea of digital transformation increases our complexity. Now, when we look at digital transformation, as in talking about how it relates to COVID, if we go to the next slide, right, we talk about digital transformation, it's human reality. The quote of the Microsoft CEO is, hey, we've done 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months, right? And this is very much the reality, right? The COVID has now taken and thrown gasoline on the fire of digital transformation. But digital transformation isn't just about taking the existing timeline and making it go faster. COVID has fundamentally caused us to rethink the way that we're approaching this, right? Because in times of crisis, we rethink what we're doing. So at the beginning of the year, in January, we surveyed all our CEOs. We said, hey, what's most important to you, right? Digital trust programs, digital infrastructure, workplace transformation. Those are really big, right? And all of a sudden we get to a time of crisis and we go, whoa, 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 whoa. Those move down to the bottom. So what's changed? Well, the new things are about resilient operations, about customer experience programs, right? When you get into a time of crisis, what do you worry about? Let's make sure we can deliver offerings. Let's make sure that our customers are happy. Data, right? Because as we talked about this digital transformation loop, the fuel of digital transformation is all about data. And of course, connectivity, right? So this COVID isn't just about accelerating digital transformation. It causes us to rethink, right? Everything that we're doing, rethink this whole approach to the complexity that Serguei talked about in the initial keynote. Now, the other thing is we look about these reminders, right? If we go to the next slide, right? COVID all of a sudden forced us to rethink our threats, right? When Serguei was talking about ransomware, maybe we were a little bit passé before COVID. After COVID, we go, oh my gosh, what are our threat vectors? How am I now, with everybody at home, right? What am I vulnerable to, right? And this was a very interesting study. So we launched this study on March 23rd, before the COVID thing hit, right? And I thought like, oh my gosh, my results are gonna be totally trashed. Exact opposite, right? Half of the results for this study came before COVID hit the fan. Half of these studies hit after, and it really forced us to start rethinking what's important, rethinking our priorities, right? All of a sudden we go, oh, ransomware is important, right? After COVID hit, we go, oh my gosh, right? I am very vulnerable to ransomware. I am very vulnerable to phishing. I am very vulnerable to business email compromise. The front lines of our businesses against this cyber miscreant we're reminded that they've changed, right? We were reminded that we are no longer on-prem. Now, we think, hey, everything's going to go back to normal. But if we think about the reality, if we go to the next slide, the reality is different, right? When we ask people, about working from home, about 6% of people were remote before COVID. After COVID, we're now looking at, like 53% are remote. And oh, by the way, in 2021, we asked people, hey, is everybody going to come back to the office? The answer is no. It's not going to go back to the way it was. Things are fundamentally different. The complexity that you're looking at, the complexity that we're telling you you need to rethink is not going to change. So if we go to the next slide, there's a couple of key themes that we want to hit about this expanding attack surface, right? In this new reality, and maybe it's not a new reality, but it's that we realize that our reality is fundamentally changed, right? We're noticing that there's a whole lot of things different. Companies are deploying more mobile devices. Companies are now encouraging work from home. Companies are now employing, more agile IT. These are not things that are new. They are things that, we realize now that, oh my gosh, we have this complexity and it's accelerating. So those of you who are on the other end watching this, right, you're dealing with this complexity, and you need to be rethinking the way that you fundamentally approach security and IT to deal with this complexity. And it's important to note, this problem isn't something that you can just solve with more bodies, right? Because if we go to the next slide, one of the themes that we've been talking about for a long time are the skill shortages, right? As we look, there will be 10.5 million additional full-time equivalent employees needed over the next 5-year period. Almost 10% of those are in security, right? You just can't go, hey, I have a security problem and I'm going to throw bodies at the problem. And oh, by the way, COVID didn't help that. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that as we asked people what skills you needed to help, deal with this talent issue after the first wave of the economic recovery after COVID, right? Cybersecurity still remains one, but you're noticing some themes there, right? IT operations, digital innovation, right? Companies are now needing to respond, and you're seeing some other themes come in. It's more than just security. It's about product reliability. It's about technology innovations. Companies are recognizing that they fundamentally need to do things differently. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is one of my favorite slides, right? And this is a gentleman by the name of Theodore Levitt. He was the editor of the Harvard Business Review, right? And he said something I think is profound, right? He said, people don't want a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole, right? And as we in security tend to focus on the problem, we tend to focus on the wrong problem. We tend to focus on, hey, we need another endpoint security, or we need EDR tools, or we need more SIM. We tend to focus on product. The problem is not a product problem. As we talk about rethinking our approach to security, it's not a product problem. It's a security problem. So as we rethink it, it's not about throwing more tech at the issue. It's about addressing the fundamental problem. Now, as we look at dealing with the fundamental problem is complex. If we go to the next slide, right, we have this numerous numbers of complexity, right? We have high-risk data channels like internet access points, lost or stolen smartphones, employee remote access, Wi-Fi sniffing of endpoints, email leakage, right? The number of channels is high, right? If we look at high-risk data types, secrets, encryption keys, passwords, credit card data, personally identifiable information, right? Data is the heart of this digital transformation. Now, as we look at the next slide, right, here are the benefits They're the key themes. This is the problem. This is how we define it. So as you start to rethink your approach to security, rethink it based upon this. So the problems that we're dealing with, malware, right? Business email compromise, other sorts of issues. Now, as we do that, we articulate the problem. You know, we had a really interesting survey, right? And so as we were talking to people about their endpoint vendor of choice, we said, hey, how many of you have switched? And of those people that switched, we go, let's look at this data. So as you're rethinking your endpoint approach, what was the number one reason you would switch? And if we go to the next slide, the number one reason that people switched were to reduce the number of endpoint agents, right? As we rethink this approach to IT, right? As we rethink this approach to security, there's a number of quote unquote soft costs that ain't so soft, right? And you see that in this data as why people are switching vendors, right? Reducing the number of agents, reducing incident investigation time, improving prevention of zero-day attacks, right? Reducing the spread of malware, reducing the number of vendors, right? There's a ton of soft costs that if you get more strategic, if you rethink your approach, if you don't do what you do yesterday, because yesterday is no longer the reality, right? You can take the approach to be able to strategically do things better. Consolidation of agents, reduction of complexity. And as you reduce the complexity that sometimes is self-created, you create the ability to be able to deliver a higher level of security. So I've talked a lot about COVID. What does COVID mean moving forward? Well, there's a host of things, but here's the thing that I would tell you. Look at rethinking for the next normal, right? You know, don't rethink your approach to security, rethink your approach to IT overall, because the more that we can integrate security into our IT, the more that we can, in fact, harden our infrastructure, the more that we can reduce complexity, the better off we are. Let's prevent the problem, let's simplify, let's reduce complexity. That will make our ability to implement security better, right? I always encourage people, focus on the 4 new control points: endpoint, identity, application, data. That is how you need to frame security moving forward. And of course, the last thing I would recommend is strongly look at retiring legacy IT approaches. They were born in an era that wasn't the reality of digital transformation. Digital transformation has fundamentally required a rethinking of our approach to security. And with that, hey, I just want to say thank you for the time. I realize that that there's other things you could be doing. I'm thrilled that you took the time to listen to me, and I thank Acronis for the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for that presentation. Right, we are almost towards the end of our webinar. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our keynote speakers and panelists once again for their perspective and expertise that they have provided. Before we close, I just wanted to remind all the audience that there may be some questions and answers questions that we are not able to answer during this period. We will make that available to you through email after this event is over. All right. So let me just also share with you some interesting findings that we have compiled from our Acronis Cyber Readiness Survey 2020. 31% of global companies we found and surveyed are being attacked at least once a day. India is way ahead of the curve, followed by US and the UAE. Only 9% of all companies are being targeted by cyber attack at least once an hour. And exactly 50% of all respondents report encountering a cyber attack at least once a week in the past 3 months. That is something to think about. Also in the same survey, we found that 92% of global companies surveyed had to adopt new technologies to be able to work remotely. The top solutions were workplace collaboration tools, privacy solutions, and endpoint cybersecurity solutions. Only 7% didn't need to upgrade their existing set of tools. And since we are speaking on tools for remote work, we'd like to once again ask you as our audience to join us to participate in another poll. So the poll is this: how many agents do you run on your user endpoints for cybersecurity, data protection, and remote management purposes? So you should see the poll popping up on the screen now. We encourage all the audience to participate. So again, the question is, how many agents do you run on your user endpoints for cybersecurity, data protection, and remote management purposes? So last but not least, I really hope that today's event has given all of you some insights in getting prepared and ready in this trying period. I have some upcoming events and complementary resources that I would like to tell you about. So bear with us. So we cordially invite you to join us at our Acronis Global Cyber Summit in October this year. We'll have another spectacular lineup of cyber protection speakers, forums, and workshop, but alas, not again in Miami Beach that we had last year. But this year, it is fully online, it is free, it is highly interactive, and it can be accessed from any device. So please, if you can, join us in this event where you can learn a lot more about Acronis and the products that we have. And also we have case studies from the manufacturing industries from Acronis as well. You see on this page over here, there are a couple of links that you can find out more information on our customers. We also have tech industry analyst reports from IDC, Forrester Research, Frost & Sullivan, and DGIC. As mentioned a couple of times in today's webinar, we have our Acronis Cyber Protect ready and available now. So just go to that link that you see on the bottom left on the screen and you can get your trial version. And finally, I also like to make some comments about Acronis Cyber Foundation. We will very much appreciate if you would like to make a donation to Acronis Cyber Foundation Emergency Relief. It is actually a chance to build and support schools in developing countries around the world. So look out for an email with a link of today's recording. And once again, I would like to thank you, all of you, for your time and attention today. Be well, be safe, be well, and be secure. Thank you very much.